Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our docuseries, Hormones, Health, and Harmony. I'm Dr. Trevor Cates, best-selling author and founder of the Spa Doctor Natural Skincare line. You may know me from my podcast, The Woman's Doctor, or perhaps you read my book, Clean Skin from Within. Creating programs like this does come with a certain amount of what we're going to focus on this episode, stress. I'm the mother of 3 children, lots of love and joy there, but parenting can be stressful at times. I've also got a new book coming out and recently got married, and while a wedding is one of the most wonderful events in a person's life, the weeks of intensive planning that come before it, now there's some stress. In this episode, we search for solutions. We'll hear about the devastating impact that stress has on our hormones and our bodies, and we'll explore how the not so simple science of sleep is essential to coping with anxiety. Finding the right balance between the two, stress versus rest, is vital to managing and maintaining a healthy life.
I will never forget when I was 30 years old, about 12 years ago, I woke up and literally could not lift my head up off the pillow. And I knew something wasn't right. I remember crawling to my bathroom that day and looking in the mirror, thinking to myself, like, how am I gonna take care of my patients if I can't even take care of myself?
I think we underestimate, as Americans especially, but all across the world, we kind of underestimate how much trauma and stress we're putting our mental and emotional bodies and physical bodies through on an everyday basis. And I would say, like, if I look back even just in my own life, the amount of stress that I went through between the ages of 6 and 12, which isn't necessarily a super stressful time, but I was exposed to enough stress in those years, and really, like, by the time I was 14, my hair was falling out in clumps, right? I'm a 14-year-old, I'm a teenager. And nobody, like, the doctors were like, oh, here's Rogaine for your hair loss. Nobody tested my thyroid. Nobody ever tested my adrenals. But our adrenals are the foundational system to energy in our whole body.
So I went to the doctor, I went to this hormone specialist in the area, and I got all of my labs run, and literally the top of my lab said hormone hot mess, because it's literally what was going on. My cortisol levels were out of control, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, everything was whacked out. I was a stressaholic. I had been running myself into the ground since I was a teenager. I thought that that's how women operated in the world. My worth was predicated on productivity and how much I could do for everybody around me, how much I could take care of people, show up for people, and I just kept running and running until I slammed right into the Mack truck. And I'm really grateful it happened when I was much younger, so I could really heal my body and start to create some really beautiful practices to not find myself in that situation again.
Stress management is paramount. We know that 90% of doctor visits are related to stress. Stress is very dangerous. We know that it raises blood pressure, can cause cardiac irregularities, it affects every part of the body. And I'll talk about the brain. It'll actually deplete neurotransmitters. And depleted neurotransmitters lead to anxiety and depression.
When we lived, as cavemen out on the savannah, there was really good reasons for stress. If you were being chased by a lion, you should be stressed and you should run like heck and get out of there and save your life. But then you're supposed to calm down once you've hit an area of safety. And so we're not supposed to be under chronic stress. We don't have those kinds of threats anymore in our environment, but we still have stress. So people are sitting in cars and they're sitting in traffic and people are honking and it's stop and go and their levels go up. And the body doesn't know the difference between being chased by a lion or sitting in traffic. And when we measure what's happening in the body, it's the same things that are happening in response to life or death situations, or these just daily chronic levels of stress that we never come down from. It's really detrimental to be in that chronic stress state and never to come down from it.
When we're in a stress state, fight or flight, we're pumping out adrenaline, noradrenaline, and that's important when we're fleeing from wild animal. But we don't have that anymore. We're not running away from wild animals. We're sitting at a desk, sitting at a computer. We have a million thoughts in our mind. We have deadlines, lots of responsibility, and there's no escape.
One of the things I talk a lot about with pretty much everybody is stress. I don't know that I have met any single patient in my entire life, or person really, that isn't stressed and doesn't struggle with how to manage their stress and how it impacts their hormones. I actually really love to draw pictures and draw diagrams of, here are what your stress hormones do, here are what your reproductive hormones do, and here's where they actually connect.
There's a wonderful book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers by Robert Sapolsky. And he talks about how zebras are out on the plain, a lion's chasing them, massive stress, increase in stress, run, get out of there. But then as soon as that threat ends and they realize that the lions aren't there, they all go back to grazing and all of those levels come down again. They're not sitting there ruminating in their head, talking to each other. Can you believe that lion? Did you see him? He tried to kill me. He tried to eat me. I can't believe it. They're not spending hours ruminating on this. We do. We ruminate on this all day, and little things. I can't believe my boss said that to me. I can't believe my coworker did that. And we don't let it go. And that rumination keeps our stress levels just as high as when the event happened.
When we ask ourselves, our body, to go into that stress mode, into this survival mode, produce cortisol, adrenaline, pick the car off the baby, to have inhuman strength, all those things, we need that in short periods of time. But when we, in our lifestyles, do that all day long, then that affects the ability for rest, digest, and libido. And we cannot produce the hormones after certain ages well without those cortisol, those little adrenal glands working for us.
How does being in a prolonged stress or survival mode impact our brain, our essential neurotransmitters and hormones?
When a woman has ongoing stress, her neurotransmitters are going to be out of balance. She'll have more epinephrine, norepinephrine. Think of adrenaline. When you're running from a tiger, evolutionary-wise, our bodies have the exact same hormones when we're under stress. So think of when you're driving in traffic and people are cutting you off, or when you're late for a deadline, or when you have bills you got to pay. You have all these stressors that affects your neurotransmitters.
So the HPA axis, the A is adrenal. So this is all about the adrenal gland and how the adrenal gland is responding to perceived or real threats in our environment. So the adrenal gland, in the context of the HPA axis, though it does other things, secretes the stress-related hormones, adrenaline, and cortisol. So when we talk about higher levels, for example, of cortisol, then we should focus on this HPA axis. The final part of that, of course, is the adrenal. The H stands for hypothalamus, and the P is the pituitary. So when we experience real or perceived threat, the brain's hypothalamus responds to that experience and then programs the pituitary gland to send out a chemical, adrenal corticotropic hormone, ACTH, that then tells the adrenal gland, hey, something's going on here. And then the adrenal responds by increasing its excretion of these damaging chemicals that long-term create havoc in the body.
Instead of saying, oh, well, you're anxious and depressed, that's because you're stressed. Wait, you're anxious and depressed because you're stressed because you're depleting your neurotransmitter precursors. You've lost your neurotransmitters. You've used up your magnesium and your B vitamins. The way we can work with the neurotransmitters is to supply what are called neurotransmitter precursors. That is the raw materials that we need in order to make the neurotransmitters. And we have this great chemical factory in us. It's like a great pharmacy. And if we know how to impact it, we get the result we want. So if you're low in dopamine, you take tyrosine, and you also need cofactors like magnesium and some B vitamins. It's a real cocktail. You know, any kind of like baking a cake, you want to have all the right ingredients. And when you do that, you get a beautiful cake.
Neurotransmitters and hormones are critical to a healthy stress response. What are some of the key differences between how women and men experience and deal with stress?
For whatever reason, it seems that women are more stressed in modern society. Probably it's always been that way. Women have been the bearers of stress, the ones responsible for various outcomes in various societies. So I think that the question, is exceedingly important because of the downstream effects of stress. And let's deconstruct it for a moment. The stress hormone, cortisol, there are others that are involved that we could be talking about. But cortisol, when chronically elevated, as in the chronically stressed state, is toxic to certain brain cells, like those in the brain's memory center, the hippocampus. And it may relate to the notion that this could explain why women are Alzheimer's patients in a ratio of 2 to 1 in contrast to men.
Women absolutely experience stress differently than men. I think we experience it internally a lot. I think that we hold a lot of it inside. We feel like we shouldn't experience stress, so we make ourselves feel bad about it.
It takes a little bit of awareness. I went through this myself. I remember being in medical school and some of my colleagues who I had just met, it was freshman year, and I would sigh a lot. And it was like one of the things that I thought I did all the time. And one of my colleagues was like, "Do you know that you sigh a lot? Are you stressed out?" And I was like, "No, I'm not stressed." And she's like, "You sigh a lot. And that might be your internal stress response." And when she said that, I was like, I wonder. And it got me thinking and being more aware of it. And it took me about 1.5 years to be like, oh, actually, that was a stress response. It was me being like fresh in medical school, feeling overwhelmed, like there's a lot going on. I think it shows up in our bodies, and our bodies are constantly in communication with us if we're listening.
Even that alone can be really eye-opening for people to realize that one of the reasons their cycles are really painful or fertility has been a really deep struggle for them, or hot flashes or other perimenopausal symptoms are really troublesome for them might actually have to do a lot with their stress levels and the amount of rest that they're able to get throughout the day.
Stress management is so important, especially for women. So one thing that you can do is just try to take pause in between things that you need to do.
That's something so many of us need to do, so much on our plate. I know there are ways to test for the impact of stress on the body. Are they helpful? What do you tell your patients?
Test, don't guess. You have to do the testing. You have to see what's going on under the hood. So doing proper hormone testing, checking for adrenal function, it is important because sometimes your symptoms can be misleading. Sometimes your symptoms can look like one thing, and when you do the test, it's actually not that. So it really helps to give a direction of treatment and where we need to go. So with my patients, I do very comprehensive testing. We're doing blood work, we're doing stool testing, saliva, urine. We're looking at all the different body fluids, really, because they all give us different pieces of information.
We have new ways of testing hormones at this point. We used to be able to just look at what's the value, the number of all the estrogens, testosterone, free and total and all this, but now we can look at the pathways that they're going down. Are they going down a pathway that causes DNA damage that could cause cancer? We can see some of those things now, which is very interesting. Along with that type of testing is some neurotransmitter testing that's being done at the same time.
We can look at, for example, blood sugar response. That is strongly affected by stress. We can look at the parameters of sleep. We can measure cortisol levels. We can measure them with salivary measurements throughout the day. Certainly the 8 a.m. Cortisol level is also very valuable. So these are ways that we can look at what's going on from a stress level and then gain some insight in terms of our interventions, in terms of how we're changing that, if in fact that's something that needs to be targeted.
Do not try to do this alone. I've learned that from experience. I'm a doctor. I have my own doctor. You can't treat yourself because you're just a little too close to it. You have to have someone who can look at it and be able to see the whole picture. It's very important. So I do not recommend doing your own testing, doing your own treatment. I do recommend doing your own education and learning about this because you do need to be your own advocate.
When it comes to stress, I think most people are also looking for a lot of solutions. And so while I'm not a kitchen sink person, meaning like I don't just throw everything at people, because when you're stressed, you're already overwhelmed. And so finding a couple of focused solutions is where I like to start. Also always looking at people's pocketbooks, looking at the viability of some of those solutions. What are you actually going to do? What are you actually going to implement?
So sometimes just being mindful and saying, okay, that happened. Now, do I want to carry that with me? Do I want to keep carrying this level of stress with me and knowing that it's going to actually impact my health negatively? Or do I want to try to let it go?
Two very powerful habits to have to balance your stress is number one, breathing. So I'm sure everyone listening is now going to breathe better. So when you exhale a little longer than your inhale, it immediately puts your body into a relaxed mode. So breathing is so important to implement more in our routines. And in our culture, we don't breathe. We're holding our breath all the time. So just that in and of itself is so important. The other one is walking. I prescribe walking for every patient of mine, not with the goal of burning calories or anything like that. It calms our stress hormones. And research shows it actually helps decrease belly fat just by walking every day.
So we need to do things like exercise, and that's exactly what the animals are doing when they're shaking off their stress. We need to exercise. We need bonding. We need friends. We need to be able to talk about. We need outlets for things that are bothering us. We can't just keep it in.
Whatever way we can let go of those things that we know aren't serving us, it really does bring down all those levels in your body, and it will make you healthier.
Test. Don't guess. My favorite piece of advice from this segment. While we can learn a lot about listening to a patient's symptoms and doing a physical exam, testing is a valuable tool, so we don't assume. I get my own hormone levels and other lab work done regularly to really help understand what's happening because it helps hone in on individualized treatment. If your doctor won't be accommodating with your lab work and work with you to help get more information, then it may be time to find a new doctor. Let's recap some of the other important things we learned about stress. Stress impacts our hormones, raises blood pressure, and disrupts neurotransmitters in our brain. Stress management is paramount to a healthy life. Don't let your problems and stresses stay with you. If we ruminate on a problem, stress levels remain high even after the stressful moment has passed. Painful menstrual cycles, hot flashes, and fertility problems are all exacerbated by stress. Proper rest stabilizes high stress levels and hormones. Deep breathing, exercise, and bonding with friends are all important outlets to release the stress we hold inside. Understanding stress is important, but you can't always tackle it alone. Consider consulting a qualified healthcare provider for proper hormone testing and a whole picture view. What do you think of when you picture being tired? Fighting to hide a yawn during a meeting? Circles under your eyes when you look in the mirror? I think about that afternoon lull when it's hard to concentrate and how lovely a 15-minute nap would be. These are the physical symptoms of exhaustion we're all familiar with. Then there's what's happening on the inside, what we can't see, this strain or damage to our hormones and the body systems that we rely on. We're all tired of being tired, but as you're about to see in this segment, it's the silent internal unseen harm that we really have to pay attention to.
If we go back 20 some years, I used to do fitness modeling. I did bodybuilding competitions, figure in particular. So you had to get on stage in a bikini. This one show that I was getting ready for, the scale started going up. And I mean plus 20 pounds. And I just stopped getting on it after that. I didn't want to know. And I was fatigued. My hair was falling out. Had to throw in some extensions. It was horrible. And I was only in my 20s. So of course, like we all do, we want an answer. So I start going to different doctors. They're all telling me that you're normal. Everything is within normal limits on your lab work. You're fine. One said, eat less and exercise more. It's like, what are you talking? That's not even possible with what I'm doing to prepare for the show. So the 7th doctor finally diagnosed me and said, okay, you have Hashimoto's. I was like, yes, there's gonna be a pill that will fix me. This is awesome.
Well, when thyroid hormone goes low, we start to see people feeling very lethargic, maybe some anxiety, some depression, and that can change depending on whether or not they just have plain hypothyroidism or something called Hashimoto's thyroiditis. The Hashimoto's aspect is more of an autoimmune disorder of the thyroid, and that can be characterized by things like hair falling out, very brittle nails, dry skin, and of course the other changes that come with just regular hypothyroidism as well.
So the 7th doctor diagnosed me. I got Synthroid. 5 months later, that didn't work at all. So I went back to her and I said, you know, I've been doing some research on my big computer at the time. And turns out there's this thing called T3, and it's really powerful. So T3 with T4, can we do that? She goes, no, I don't want to do that. I said, well, I'm going to find somebody who does. And that's what led me to functional medicine. My functional medicine practitioner that saved my life became my mentor and just changed my career path totally. So that's why I do what I do, working with women in thyroid conditions, because as a practitioner, when I go through something, I can much better relate to my patients. I can understand their frustrations. I can understand their symptoms that they're dealing with. I can give them an answer and I can give them hope.
Hypothyroidism is one of the most common causes of fatigue in women, and yet it is often minimized by the conventional medical community. So in naturopathic medicine, we take a really good look at thyroid function in general.
The 2 biggest complaints I hear from my thyroid patients are weight gain and inability to lose weight, and fatigue, low energy. Remember, hypo means low, low and slow. Everything is gonna go down if you have hypothyroidism. Your mood's gonna go down, your energy's gonna go down. So if we look at the 2 thyroid hormones, T4 and T3, and we know that T3 is the active thyroid hormone, and our receptor sites on our cells need the T3, we can look at the brain. And if we're not getting enough T3 to the brain, you're just gonna feel down. You're gonna feel lethargic and fatigued and basically have no motivation whatsoever. You're gonna be dealing with brain fog and memory issues and concentration issues. You're not gonna remember what the person just told you. You're gonna think you have early onset Alzheimer's, but you don't.
The first thing that's going to cause that level of fatigue, especially accompanied with weight gain or if they're feeling cold all the time, that's going to be the thyroid function. So we got to make sure that that is on point. And we're looking for thyroid function to be in a much more narrow range than what the lab values will tell you. So personally, I like to see thyroid, at least T3 function, free T3 in the upper 3s. So 3.6, 3.8, up to 4.2. That's my kind of sweet spot for T3 function. Anything below that, you're likely symptomatic, and we likely need to do something about that.
The most common presenting symptoms of hypothyroidism are fatigue and feeling cold. It's like the brakes get put on the car and everything slows down. So checking for anemia, checking for hypothyroidism, and then really having a deep conversation about lifestyle and stress and sleep.
Everyone has days when they feel tired, exhausted even. What's the difference between feeling tired and being chronically fatigued?
Being tired is, maybe you have just, overdone it day before or not gotten enough sleep, and you get a little bit extra sleep and you're good. Fatigue is different. Fatigue is when you get that sleep and you're still tired. And you still don't feel like yourself. And that's that ongoing, longer term, just not feeling well.
Fatigue is the most common symptom I will ever get from any female who walks in my door. I feel like fatigue is so multifactorial. So I start with, what is your day today? What did you eat for breakfast? What did you get done? How did you sleep last night? How many hot flashes are you getting in a day? What are your periods like? Do you have a toxic person in your house that when you walk in the house, it sucks you up and you're like, oh, I don't know why I'm fatigued? And what about that person in your conference room who's a complete jerk sucking the blood out of you?
A lot of women I see in my practice, I think part of the reason they don't get good sleep is because they're so busy taking care of everybody else in their world. They're taking care of their kids, they're taking care of their partner, and in all that, they come last. And so at the end of the day, they've taken care of everyone else, but they haven't taken care of themselves. And so they're stressed out, their mind's running, a million directions, and it's just harder for them to relax and get into that state where they can really get good quality sleep.
You have these stressors in your body that are elevating these stressor hormones that we're really poor at elucidating. So traditional medicine does not have any measurement for how much stress you're under. But if I do believe that we will in the future really, really be able to say girl, you are so stressed. Look, right now we do stupid stuff. Your C-reactive protein is elevated. Your SED rate is elevated. Well, duh. You have all these antibodies you're making in your body against your own body. That should be a signal. Hello? Your body wants to eat you alive because you're not being nice to it. So you need to stop for a second and be nicer. And that doesn't mean getting on a treadmill and doing it 13 miles a week. That means stopping for a second and recognizing who you are. And I feel like we are toxic to ourselves, and that's very real.
When the signal is given to the adrenal glands that there's stress, there's something to be worried about. Or it could be a wedding, something happy, but you're saying, I need to run and go do this. It doesn't really know the difference between a bear that you need to survive and not be eaten, or your mother-in-law is in town, or you have something happy at work you need to do, it's just a deadline. You're telling your body you need to put the pedal to the metal and you need to go fast. And we can do that once in a while. We're supposed to be eating berries the rest of the time and wait for the bear to come, and we either survive or we don't. That doesn't happen very often, but in our lifestyles now, we're running from the bear all day long and all night long, even when you're asleep in your dreams.
We need to pace ourselves and care for ourselves as the day goes on. And as cortisol levels fall in the afternoon, to make sure that we've, again, balanced our blood sugar, that we maybe have time to collect ourselves, take a few minutes of rest in the afternoon, maybe a few minutes to meditate, and to not expect ourselves to go 24/7.
We don't want that 24/7, day after day, month after month, because when that starts to occur, our adrenal glands that pump out cortisol, and when our adrenal glands pump out cortisol properly, then we're okay, we reset. When our adrenal glands pump out cortisol ongoing, then there goes the inflammation. So inflammation goes up in the body. Where we see inflammation, we see dysregulated hormones.
Too much cortisol also causes damage to the cells in your area of memory known as the hippocampus. So if you've ever been in a super stressful situation in your life, maybe you're going through a divorce, maybe it's a move, maybe it's a pandemic, and you think to yourself, why do I have to keep lists all the time? Why can't I remember like I used to? Am I getting dementia? Is this Alzheimer's? It's probably cortisol disrupting the way you form memory and disrupting those cells in your brain. Now, on the flip side, people who have really low cortisol often struggle to handle their blood sugar. So these women are saying, I'm hungry a lot, I'm hangry a lot, I feel low blood sugar, I get dizzy, I get tired, I get headaches. And so one may be their approach to how they're eating, but the other may be they don't have the cortisol to actually help them get their blood sugar up. And so you can't ever discuss cortisol without discussing its role in glucose and blood sugar and sort of blood sugar management, because that is what cortisol does. That is the first thing that it does.
So to support adrenal function from a naturopathic perspective, rest is essential. Getting 8 hours of sleep, and getting 8 hours of sleep during the night. Another thing that I think is really helpful from a naturopathic perspective is to use adaptogenic herbs. Herbs like ashwagandha and rhodiola, epimedium, Siberian ginseng. These are adaptogens. They've been used for millennia to help the body adapt to stress. So if our adrenal glands are over-secreting cortisol, it tends to help lower it. If we have very low cortisol output, adaptogens can help to raise cortisol back to that point of balance.
So balancing cortisol involves a lot of different things. I think physical activity is very effective at modulating our cortisol level. Getting exercise in, or I should say getting movement in, can help balance our cortisol. Trying to get to bed on a regular time frame can help balance our cortisol. Diet definitely has an impact on our cortisol. If you're eating a lot of sugar and carbohydrates or simple carbohydrates, that can have an impact on cortisol.
So the tweaks that I have my patients do a lot of times is remove the crap foods, remove the more of the carbs, increase their protein, and oftentimes they feel completely different by doing that because their blood sugar gets balanced. They're not getting crashes, and that makes a massive difference.
So it's not any one thing that we have to do to help get cortisol under control. We really have to take a look at the totality of everything that affects cortisol so that we get it back under control. And if you've had a cortisol problem for a long time, it's going to take a while to get it back into balance. So expect it may take several months to really get to a point where you're on that rhythm again and you're feeling well.
I'd like to talk now about natural changes in our bodies and the effect they have on our hormones. Pregnancy, for example, a big change. How does that impact healthy hormone balance?
I've chosen to be a mother, so I had the hormonal ups and downs of pregnancy, and but in all of it, it wasn't, oh gosh, this is horrible. It's just my body's talking to me. It's telling me something is off, and I need to do something about it. And so whether that manifested as sleep issues or anxiety or more irritability than normal, I think all of those things are just ebbs and flows in how we are as humans, and it's up to us to pay attention and to see them as just opportunities to fix something or to work on something a little bit better, or to maybe change your food or cut down on coffee, or whatever it is that maybe will help bring you back into balance.
We're not the same our whole life. Our hormones are going to be different when we're teenagers, when we're in our 20s and 30s, in our 40s, and into menopausal years. Our hormones are totally different, and we need to honor that. We need to honor the differences that we experience throughout our lives. And being able to understand how our hormones change. So in our 30s, for example, progesterone can start to change. It can start to go down. And if you're not taking care of yourself in the right ways, oftentimes it can be even lower for some women. And that can be really uncomfortable. So understanding what happens naturally with our hormones through different periods of our life can be really empowering.
I decided that whenever it was going to be my time to go through menopause, that I was going to look at it very differently. I wasn't going to dread it. I wasn't going to say, okay, is it dry up, done, time? No, I couldn't wait because it allowed more time for all the passion and the purpose of the things that I want to do. But if you're not keeping your body healthy, if you're not exercising and eating well and keeping your stress where it should be, you will notice symptoms. Sleep will be disturbed, hot flashes will come on, but most of the time, for most people, that can be mitigated if your lifestyle is where it needs to be.
I think for a woman who's transitioned, who's gone through a different stage for life, and might feel like things have changed in a negative way, I would reframe it in a different way. You have a lot of life experience. You've learned a lot about yourself, you've learned a lot about your body. And although your body might be changing in a certain way, this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to take it to a different stage of your life, and that may be something you do physically, it may be something you do mentally or emotionally, but there's an opportunity there to reinvent yourself in a different way.
We've got a lot to do worldwide to educate that this is not dirty, it's not something going wrong, it's not something to be hidden, it's all to be celebrated. And I still have all the energy I had when I was younger. That hasn't gone away, and it won't. And I am starting the third chapter of my life And I've got more on my plate now than I ever have. And I'm not a person that sits around, and never have. But now I'm adding more to my plate because now, yay, here I am. I have the wisdom and I have the experience, and I'm ready to rock and roll.
We've all heard the stories of famous people and great minds who operate on very little sleep. Leonardo da Vinci took a 20-minute nap 4 times a day without ever sleeping through the night. President John F. Kennedy is rumored to have slept only 4 hours a night. We've been conditioned to believe that less sleep is somehow a badge of honor and strength, but nothing could be further from the truth. A lack of proper sleep is tearing down our bodies and throwing our hormones out of whack. We may be tired of being tired, but unless we take action, it won't change, and our hormones will never find the harmony they crave. Let's take a look at a few of the key takeaways from this segment. Low thyroid levels don't only lead to slow metabolism and low energy, they can impact our moods, leading to brain fog and depression. Hypothyroidism is a common cause of fatigue, but conventional medicine often minimizes it. Be sure to get a full thyroid panel if you have symptoms of low thyroid. Rest is essential for keeping hormones in balance. Most of us need 7 to 8 hours of quality, uninterrupted sleep each night. Cortisol levels are highest in the morning and fall as the day goes on. To help us fall asleep at night, our cortisol levels need to drop. Women have been taught to see menopause as something to dread. It's time to embrace life changes in a positive light, an opportunity to empower yourself with the next stage. According to the National Institute of Health, 50 to 70 million Americans have sleep disorders, and 1 in 3 adults don't get the recommended amount of uninterrupted sleep they need to protect their health. Also, numerous studies show that insomnia is considerably more common in women, with some saying the lifetime risk is 40% higher. Sleep isn't simply about resting your body or quieting your mind. In fact, it's more powerful than that. Sleep is medicine. Here's what the health professionals I spoke with had to say about the healing powers of sleep.
Sleep is so important for women's health. And we've prided ourselves on, I can get by on 4 hours sleep, 5 hours sleep, just because there's so much to do. And it's not a good idea. We really need it. We need restorative sleep. There's stages of sleep. And there's deep sleep, delta sleep, where we restore our body. There's REM sleep. And during REM sleep, we're dreaming. And dreaming is important. It's an outlet. It's a way of consolidating information and relieving stress.
Sleep is one of the most restorative things that we can do to balance our health, to keep us well. I like to see a woman and men get 8 hours of sleep. And I think it's really important to have a sleep hygiene, almost like a practice, a ritual, if you will, to support sleep.
Sleep is by far the most important thing that I need my women doing. Hands down. Like, you gotta be sleeping. And it's because this is where all of your healing and repairing occurs. Human beings, we're circadian, meaning we, and our body processes and the things that we do, it's directly influenced by the sun and the light structures that are happening outside. So we're meant to actually go to sleep when the sun goes down, wake up when the sun comes up, and have sun exposure throughout the day.
I think we need to tune into the circadian rhythm of nature and make sure that we go to sleep as the sun begins to set. That doesn't mean we sleep at 7 p.m., but it doesn't mean that we should be staying up till midnight on our phones.
Cortisol and melatonin work together in that circadian rhythm to make sure that your natural body rhythm is awake in the morning and sleep at night. When they get out of whack, your sleep is going to get out of whack.
I always think about my patients who stay up too late at night, or maybe they work a swing shift or a night shift, or they travel a lot for work and they're in various time zones. All of those things can disrupt their normal circadian rhythm and release of the hormone melatonin. And then they're not getting a good night's sleep. Either they can't fall asleep or they wake up a lot.
If you are getting enough sleep, it will alleviate a lot of stress. When we sleep, we heal. If we don't get enough sleep, we actually force our body to go into overdrive. So it's like pushing to push out the toxins. It's pushing to digest all of the processed foods that you ate. It's pushing to maintain that healthy lifestyle.
It's very common for women to have sleep problems, hard to fall asleep, hard to stay asleep. When they wake up, they're still tired. And we should be able to fall asleep well, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. It's more times than not that isn't the case for patients who come in to see me. And in a large majority of the patients, it's due to adrenal problems. So our adrenal glands, they help us deal with stress. They're two little hats that sit on top of our kidneys. And when we have problems with these glands, we really have a hard time with our sleep.
So many women are waking up wired and tired because they're not getting the restoration they need. Also, it seems like this heroic thing to get less sleep these days. Like women are like, oh, I can get by in 5 hours. I don't need sleep. It's fine. I'll sleep on the weekend. You can't make up sleep. There's no, oh, I'll make up my sleep on the weekend. It's that 7 to 8 hours every night is so crucial. You will think better. Your hormones will be more balanced. Weight won't stay on as long. You'll have better access to your intuition, all those things. When we are sleep deprived, we're basically zombies.
If we don't sleep, we actually stress because we wake up all in a tizzer. I'm late. Your blood pressure goes high. You begin to have anxiety. You begin to have stress. So stress and rest, you've got to have stress to alleviate. You've got to have rest to alleviate the stress.
What are some warning signs that women should pay attention to that signal they're not getting enough sleep?
If you're the woman that wakes up in the morning and before you get out of bed, you want to have a pot of coffee, you've got an issue. And that means you're not sleeping well, either deep sleep or enough REM sleep. And that has to do many times with cortisol, the stress hormone, is keeping you from getting into those deep levels.
My favorite hormone to balance would be cortisol, because a lot of patients have stress, and a lot of times that's related to elevated or depressed levels of cortisol, which then affects your sleep. And then if you don't get enough sleep, that affects your moods, and it just is like a vicious cycle.
So normally we should have energy in the morning, and throughout the day, our cortisol, goes down, and by the evening time, it's nice and low, and that helps our melatonin to be high so we can sleep. But for those of us who have chronic stress, oftentimes it's flipped, where in the evening our cortisol is higher, and so that makes it hard to wind down.
We have trouble falling asleep. We have trouble staying asleep because we keep ourselves so busy during the day with work and the kids and this and that. And then we lay down and the mind doesn't know how to rest. It's like everything we've avoided that day, the conversation we didn't have, the emotion we suppressed, the stress that we never really dealt with, it all comes up at night. And our cortisol levels are way too high at night. And so we can't calm down. And then what I see happen to women is then they have anxiety about not sleeping.
People who are not sleeping in the right environment, they're sleeping the same number of hours, but it's not deep sleep. They're not reaching the slow wave sleep that they need. They're not getting REM sleep. They're not dreaming because they're not getting REM sleep. So on a physical and a mental health level, that's a challenge. And so we have to start there.
Here's the way I explain it to patients. Our brain waves, we have different patterns. Some are beta. They're very fast. When we're in the zone, and we're doing these great things that we're like, how did I just accomplish that? We're in those fast beta brain waves, but they need to be even. That's called coherence. They need to look alike, same amplitude, height, same distance. Sometimes they get a little wacky crazy. We're in beta, high beta, but they're not articulating correctly. They're all over the place. It's called busy mind. You know when you're in it. You can't think you can't focus. But when it's time for sleep, we ask ourselves when we're in high beta all day long, go, lay down and say, I really need to get to sleep. I really got to get to sleep, but I can't get to sleep. And you're trying to go from fast beta waves into these slow, coherent delta waves where the body is at peace and ready for rest.
Sadly, what's often given is a prescription for sleep medication, which doesn't work for very long and is also addictive. So any opportunity I have, I want to really emphasize the addictiveness of these medications and to be very careful before considering accepting a prescription. And they were only meant for short-term use.
Can you give some examples of hormonal changes and lifestyle changes that can get in the way of a good night's sleep?
Hormonal fluctuations, especially in women, because ours fluctuate a lot more than men's do, can help us or can hinder us. And understanding and being wise to our bodies and how we're feeling in that moment. And hormones play a lot into that feeling. Different times of the month, we may be more creative. Other times, we may need more rest. And it's learning to listen to our bodies and respect the signals that are there for us.
So a lot of times people's sleep disturbance has to do with going through perimenopause or menopause, where the estrogen and progesterone decline. And then during the night, they develop a hot flash, or they might even sweat at night, and then it wakes them up. So if I identify hot flashes and sweats as the cause of their sleep disruption, I really want to work on balancing out hot flashes and sweats.
One of the most dreaded symptoms of perimenopausal time are hot flashes. They mostly happen at night, but they can happen during the day. It's usually at an inopportune time. But what I've noticed is that happens because estrogen has dropped. That's a lack of estrogen or an imbalance in all of the hormones. But we can have a person on the exact right hormone. We can look at the values and they look perfect. Yet they still break through and have hot flashes. Invariably, if you ask, what's been happening in your life before you started having these hot flashes again, it's usually they've gone through some kind of stressful situation. So why is that? When they're going through stress, the adrenal glands aren't making the hormones, they're making cortisol to run from the bear. So I teach the patients, listen, you could come in here every week and we could be upping and downing all of your hormones, trying to keep them balanced, but your lifestyle and how you handle your stress, if we can't balance that, we're playing a hard upstream toy to be able to know how to keep you balanced.
The vast majority of people are not doing what they need to allow their body to feel safe enough to sleep. I'll give you one example. Most people sleep in a room that's way too hot for sufficient sleep. Optimal is about 65 to 68 degrees. Now, the reason for that is for our body to start to initiate sleep, our core body temperature has to drop about 2 degrees centigrade. That's quite literally impossible in a room that's too warm. The room needs to be pitch black. We need to make sure that there's no ambient noise that's impacting. We need to make sure that they haven't had exposure to things like blue light, which is very stimulating to the brain. Blue light, for example, reduces our ability to produce melatonin. Melatonin is that hormone that people like to take for sleep. Well, let's see if we can help our body produce it on its own, which is what it's been doing for generations.
Let's be honest, we're not going to stop having technology around us. So we need to be able to set healthy boundaries with these different devices. So one of the things I tell my patients is about 60 to 90 minutes before bed, turn off your phone. And if it's hard to remember to do that, you can set a reminder that pops up that says, turn me off. So you can turn it off and start to let your body kind of wind down.
We're talking about sleep solutions, things we can do that don't involve medication. What tips do you have? What can you tell us about how to get a good night's sleep?
Instead of sitting up on our phones until midnight with that blue light blocking melatonin production, we need to turn those phones off at least 2 hours before we get ready for bed. Have a hot bath, do some meditation, do some stretching. There are yoga poses that actually help us sleep. Use lavender oils. And a little meditation really does wonders.
We have so many wonderful natural ways to sleep. First of all, chamomile tea. And so many herbs, valerian, for example. And my latest favorite is hemp oil extract, or CBD, which has gotten a lot of press. And you might wonder, is it just placebo effect? Is it hype? What is it? And in fact, it's part of what's called the endocannabinoid system. So it's actually a very important, this is a very important system. And the whole reason for the endocannabinoid system, which we only discovered in the 90s, is to help us to rest, to protect, to relax, and to forget.
Other things that can help with sleep is getting enough light during the day. So getting out, getting some sunshine when you first wake up, it's a bit of an adrenal reset to where in the evening you're able to wind down better and sleep more restfully. The other thing that makes a huge difference with sleep is eating more protein, balancing your blood sugar. When you have proper blood sugar throughout the day, you don't crash at night. A lot of times for women who wake up in the middle of the night, it's because their blood sugar crashed. And so their adrenal glands think, oh my gosh, I'm running from a tiger, I'm stressed out, I gotta make stress hormones. And then your eyes pop open and you're wide awake. So when that gets balanced out, you stay asleep throughout the night because you don't get into that kind of emergency mode.
Now we know that we need serotonin for calming and a good mood, and serotonin is converted to melatonin. And very often when people are depleted in serotonin, they're not making enough melatonin and they can't sleep. So giving something like 3 milligrams of melatonin is very useful.
In my practice, working with women on the emotional level, what I also notice is they start sleeping better. Because if we're not handling our subconscious emotions, feelings, repressed memories, if we're not handling those things, our brain's gonna try to work it out somewhere. And so we'll work it out in our dreams, we'll work it out in our sleep state, and we won't fall into that deep sleep state that really is that place where we can rest and recover and restore. So working with our emotions, working with stuff we haven't processed, working with all that stuff in the waking hours tends to lead to much better sleep because the body's like, oh, she's processing this during waking hours. I don't have to try to process all this stuff in sleep. I can actually rest.
I think women carry a mental load that is far beyond men in the way that our culture is set up, in the way that society plays itself out. And so cortisol and stress is a huge part of how women need to look at their health and need to take care of themselves. Things like mindfulness, things like going outside first thing in the morning to kind of work out that circadian rhythm can be huge helps for decreasing cortisol and making sure cortisol is at appropriate levels. If cortisol is not appropriate, you're going to feel run down, you're going to feel tired, you're going to feel frazzled. And you know what? Those things are so common, and we have a lot of easy fixes.
An ideal night's sleep looks like where we can fall asleep easily, usually within about 15 minutes. We can stay asleep throughout the night, and we wake up feeling pretty refreshed. That's how it should be when we're getting good sleep. What helps women feel refreshed instead of stressed would be two main things. One is doing things that make you happy. So thinking about what makes you happy, and do you do those things? Do you do them frequently enough? And most of the time, the answer is no. When we do things that make us happy, it increases oxytocin, which is the love hormone. It's the bonding hormone. And I kind of think of it, we can bond more with even ourselves when we do things that make us happy. So that's huge. And the other thing is getting proper sleep. Really, when you get proper sleep, you feel like Superwoman the next day.
Clearly, a lot of people have sleep issues today. We need to plan better for more productive sleep routines. And why not? We build workout routines at the gym. We create routines and schedules in our jobs to make those important deadlines. Why should our sleep routines be any different? Any routine, especially a new one, takes practice and patience. Now that you've heard how imperative sleep is, consider building your own routine to ensure you get enough sleep. Here are some helpful highlights to achieve a better sleep routine. Lack of sleep forces our bodies into overdrive, keeping stress levels high. When we sleep, we heal, bringing hormone levels back in line. Try to avoid prescription sleep medications. They lose their effectiveness over time, can be highly addictive, and don't address the underlying cause. Listen to your body throughout the month. At different times in a woman's cycle, more rest and sleep may be required. Set technology boundaries. Turning off all devices at least 90 minutes before bedtime is vital to preparing the body for sleep. Going outside and taking in sunshine and fresh air, especially in the morning, helps keep hormone levels in balance so you can sleep at night. As much as we try, we're not going to make stress go away completely. It's just not realistic with the busy and complicated lives we lead today. That's why it's so important to manage your stress, including the medicine of sleep. It begins with mindset. Sleep is not a luxury. It's not something to catch up on the weekend or when you finally get away for that summer vacation. Sleep is a necessity every day. Using what you've heard here, create a sleep ritual that works. Try it out soon in the comfort of your own bedroom. Give it the priority it deserves. Sleep will reduce stress levels and allow you to better manage your life. Try it for yourself and you'll see. In our next episode, we'll look at hormone disruptors that aren't easy to spot. Toxins. They're hiding in our homes and our food, our detergents, our beauty products, silently throwing our hormones out of whack. You don't want to miss this. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.